Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching from around the world. Welcome. We'd love to have you guys here today for today's webinar on Tanzu RabbitMQ. But before we bring in our marvelous speakers, I do want to go over some housekeeping items. We love to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, I think we'd have the answers. Ask them below using the Ask the Question tab. In addition, we know that you guys are here to hear from us. We'd love to hear from you guys. So if you want to leave us any feedback, let us know how we did, how we're doing, or what you like to hear at future events. Hit the Rate This tab also below the presentation screen. Now, I know you guys aren't here to hear from me, so let me bring in our two marvelous speakers. From across the pond, we have both Ed and Howard. Hey guys, thanks for joining us today.
Hi. Cool. Well, yeah, let's kick off. So first off, hi everybody. I'm Ed Byford. I'm the product lead for RabbitMQ. So I have the great privilege of working across both the open source project and the commercial offerings. Based in the UK, as AJ mentioned, and this lovely office behind me is somewhere I haven't seen for a little while, but we'll be going back to that soon. And I'd like to pass over to Howard.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Howard Twine, product manager for RabbitMQ as well. And much like Ed, I have the unenviable task of juggling between the open source community and the value that we can add to our commercial offerings for RabbitMQ as well. So I'll hand back to Ed to kick things off.
Thanks, Howard. So we're going to go through some of the Tanzu RabbitMQ features today. And some of the things we're going to cover are essentially the vision and mission. Why do we have RabbitMQ? Why do we have Tanzu RabbitMQ? Why does it exist? Why are we even here today? You might well be asking. We're going to cover some of the differences between the open source software and the enterprise edition. And then we're going to do a deep dive on some of those commercial plugins and features that are useful for using RabbitMQ at scale. We've got a couple of new ones in there for you as well. We're going to cover off support and what happens there and how you can get support not only for your open source RabbitMQ, but also for the Tanzu edition. And then we're going to go on to roadmap. So stay tuned for things coming up in the future. So the first thing I want to cover really is the context of why we're here. So if we think about data as essentially a capability that organizations have within themselves, but also a necessary skill to build up. The organizations which are most successful are those which can react quickly to data that's coming in. If you're having a marketing campaign going on, you don't want to wait until the end of the week or the end of the month or even the end of the day before you process the results and figure out what your conversion rate is. You really want to be able to take input from the website, see where people are clicking, see where people are looking, and change things on the fly and maybe do A/B testing. That's where traditional sort of batch processing falls short. And that's why we now have things like RabbitMQ, that's a highly performant messaging and streaming broker that comes in and allows organizations to react much faster to changes. You also it allows you essentially to connect disparate systems. So it introduces some level of ability to handle essentially increased resiliency. So if organizations, developers are working across temporal boundaries or geographical boundaries, and you need to integrate those applications or teams across those different boundaries, RabbitMQ can sit in the middle and help handle that. You also don't want to make sure that essentially the operations team is the bottleneck for creating and deploying data services. So one of the things we're really keen to help with is allowing the ability for development teams to have self-service access, because anything that gets in the way of developers creating value and delivering value for their internal users or their customers is time wasted. And finally, in terms of having business continuity, because these systems are so mission critical at passing data around an organization, and as we've previously discussed, you need to react quite quickly to changes happening within certain business activities. It's important to make sure that those messaging middleware is essentially handling business continuity and is extra resilient. So with that comes RabbitMQ and Tanzu RabbitMQ, its commercial distribution. So we employ most of the core contributors to RabbitMQ, which is the world's most widely used open source messaging and now streaming broker. It's written in Erlang, which is a language developed for open telemetry systems and open telephony systems. So that allows for highly redundant activity, high fault tolerance, and the ability to do things like clustering and failover for concurrent applications. It has a wide range of client libraries. So there's only 70 different client libraries which are provided by the community, and there's a range which is supported directly by us. And there's a large global community. RabbitMQ's implemented an open standard of AMQP since 2007, and it's got highly mature messaging protocol support for other things like MQTT, Stomp, etc. So in terms of Tanzu RabbitMQ, what that experience of working with RabbitMQ has done, and our experience of working with enterprise customers in that atmosphere, is allow us to determine what's good to run RabbitMQ at scale and allow you to process large amounts of information securely and in a very resilient way. And so essentially, Tanzu RabbitMQ is a set of service technologies that allows customers to deploy and operate open source RabbitMQ as a service on their infrastructure. It also adds some additional capabilities like multi-site replication. It allows you to have cost savings, which I'll go through later. And it has additional security and compliance enhancements as well. So to sum up, Tanzu RabbitMQ, which is the bulk of what we're going to be going through today, is really an enterprise-grade message broker with event streaming capabilities, and it's a set of service technologies that allows you to manage that. And that technology essentially connects multiple distributed applications and allows you to process high-volume data in real time and at scale. So why consider Tanzu RabbitMQ over RabbitMQ? Well, I'll cover a bit of both, and I'll start at the bottom along with the foundational RabbitMQ capabilities. So because RabbitMQ is well known and well loved by the community, you're able to find examples of where people have used RabbitMQ for various use cases in the past. It also makes hiring for the RabbitMQ skill set much easier because the technology has been used so widely that you tend to be able to find folks on LinkedIn or on other job recruitment sites that have used RabbitMQ before. So it enables you a bit of flexibility there, especially with personnel. It requires a limited amount of specialist knowledge. If you've been a developer in the past 15 years, the likelihood is at some point in microservices, you'll have used RabbitMQ. It's also highly interoperable. So as I mentioned, there's multiple different messaging standards that are supported. We've just recently added MQTT5 to the list. And we also have streaming capabilities as well. Previously, RabbitMQ just had messaging, but for the last few years, we've had stream semantics too, which we can go through. It's also highly stable. There's many examples of customers that have had years of uninterrupted running. And essentially, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge for us because these things don't get noticed until it's time to upgrade. And so essentially, we sometimes come across instances or deployments of RabbitMQ that have been running for many, many years without interruption, which is great to hear in terms of the stability. So Tanzu RabbitMQ essentially looks at what are the concerns and the priorities of enterprise users and adds additional capabilities and features on top of that. So it doesn't change the developer API for RabbitMQ, but it does change some of the management technologies and some of the additional capabilities that you can leverage. So in terms of data governance, you can essentially filter events, and I'll go through this in more detail, in order to provide audit logging capabilities. Disaster recovery. There are additional capabilities around having resilience to entire deployment failures, and we'll go through how that works later. There's cost savings. RabbitMQ contains compression. The Tanzu RabbitMQ, I should say, contains compression, which allows you to save money when you're transferring data between availability zones. And finally, developer self-service. We'll go through some of this later, but when you're deploying on Tanzu or on Kubernetes, there's additional orchestration and automation that you can allow developers to provide their own or set up their own RabbitMQ with guardrails. This is a more, when the slide loads, oh, there we go. Yeah, the slide was building. So that is all wrapped in a enterprise support package. So when you're purchasing a license for RabbitMQ, Tanzu RabbitMQ, you essentially get 24/7 enterprise support, and that's for any deployment of RabbitMQ that is based on an artifact which we develop. So that can be the open source. If you're using some of that, it can be Tanzu RabbitMQ. We will support all of that. This is a more in-depth look at what we've just covered. I'll leave that up on the screen. If you'd like to read it, you can pause it now, but I'm going to cover all of this later, so I will skip through that. This is covering some of how we can install RabbitMQ and what is available. So as it mentions here on the left, we've got a SKU, or the SKU covers support for all of these versions. If you're running open source RabbitMQ, then we'll provide support for those things, or open source RabbitMQ for Kubernetes, because there's a range of open source Kubernetes operators. And then we get on to the commercial distributions. These package the open source whilst adding additional capabilities via plugins and Kubernetes operators, which we'll go through soon. But essentially, these are Tanzu RabbitMQ for Tanzu application service. There's Enterprise RabbitMQ, which is essentially Tanzu RabbitMQ for VMs, and there's an OVA image as well as an upcoming generic tarball package. And then there's also RabbitMQ for Kubernetes. So this will be used as a set of Kubernetes operators that understand how to use some of the commercial plugins that are deployed as part of the OCI and the container image. Let's cover off Tanzu application service, because recent strategy has told us that Tanzu application service is one of the primary ways in which customers use Tanzu RabbitMQ today, and which we are strongly supporting and committing to going forward. So this is when you have an application service deployment, you can install the RabbitMQ tile, Tanzu RabbitMQ for TAS. And this enables a few different things. There's a set of service brokers that allows you to create plans for RabbitMQ. So this is a sort of template-like feature where you can allow developers, application teams to create instances of RabbitMQ that conform to a certain spec or standard. This is really handy if you want, for example, easy to use menu of plans. We've recently updated the tile to include an arbitrary, or we're limited to 5 plans before. We removed that limit now, so it's as many plans as your hardware can handle. There's also CLI to do the same thing, which you can see on the left, and there's an example there where somebody's enabling the stream plugin to allow for the use of RabbitMQ streams. But why do you want to do that? Why is it important to deploy Tanzu RabbitMQ, and what sort of benefits do you get over and above just deploying the straight open source? Well, we can give you some examples here. Here we're going to talk about using Tanzu RabbitMQ with TAS, or indeed with the Kubernetes operators. So we've been putting a significant amount of work into providing platform operations teams with an interface and a CLI which allows you to handle a large number of RabbitMQ instances very efficiently. So TAS is the cloud native application platform, which is not based on Kubernetes. And the research shows that the automation actually results in a 78% reduction in operator time spent administering RabbitMQ. So we've taken that same knowledge to heart and used that to implement some of the RabbitMQ Kubernetes operators. So how this works is RabbitMQ container image, whether it's the open source or the commercial image, is deployed. And Kubernetes essentially will then keep track of how many deployments you have, what spec they are, and retains that desired state, which you just define in the deployment YAML. So this is number of processes, number of pods, etc. And if you tell Kubernetes, I want 3 RabbitMQs running in a multi-broker configuration, and I want you to start a new instance if any of those goes down, then that's a very useful way to do that. And the Kubernetes operators allow you to do that and maintain that desired state. So instead of hiring, an army of RabbitMQ SMEs to do provisioning management, you can simply augment the expertise of the people that you have using the Kubernetes operators or tiles. As I mentioned, there's developer self-service involved in both of these offerings. So if you're deploying RabbitMQ on Taz, there's that CLI that I mentioned before, and they can define either set arbitrary parameters to define what plugins are there, or they can use one of the preset plans. And this can allow developers to, spend 37% more time coding, and actually they end up pushing to production 82% more than without those kinds of automations. And as I said, this de-scopes some of the activity and the manual effort from the human operators on the platform. In terms of zero trust, so many clouds make a very good job of protecting your data with firewalls and VPNs, but some customers cannot have data leave their network. So with RabbitMQ, you have both the option of using, this within Taz, but also on a public cloud, depending on the container image that you're using. And finally, in terms of rotations, so you can do vertical scaling and upgrading using rolling upgrades without affecting existing client applications. The client libraries that we have are smart enough to work around that. And auto upgrades and maintenance is a major driver for most customers and why they're attracted to a native cloud offering. But with RabbitMQ platform support, you can essentially have service-like features either from where you're deploying your Cloud Foundry on-premise or into the public cloud. So those are some numbers behind the technology with some of the effects and the benefits that are given. So we're going to go into some of the specific Tanzu RabbitMQ features now. We're going to cover disaster recovery. We're going to cover compression. There's a HashiCorp Vault integration and the new audit logger. So we're going to cover those now. Let's cover disaster recovery first. So warm standby replication is the name that we give our disaster recovery. And this is the essentially allows you to set up an active passive configuration. We'll go through what that means in a second. It essentially automates the entire replication between one RabbitMQ cluster and another RabbitMQ cluster running in a different site. And there's two components to that. The topology, which is the set of queues, exchanges, and bindings. And then the data, which is which messages are being consumed, which messages are on the queue, and the actual message payloads. So the way we've designed it as a team is we've implemented replication between the two clusters using the custom binary protocol, which is essentially near real-time replication based on our new high throughput protocol that's been around for a couple of years. When you do recovery, when you do failover, it ensures that only the non-consumed messages will actually be enqueued and presented to the apps. So this can reduce the load on the apps and reduce your RPO, or reduce your RTO, I should say. It's supported on VMs using the container image and the OVA using a set of CLI commands, but there's also a Kubernetes operator. So if you're using this on Kubernetes, it allows you to automate an additional 10 to 5% of the activity here. So let's cover off the next slide, and this slide's going to build for us. So we've got two data centers or two sites. I'll demonstrate with the Tanzu RabbitMQ Kubernetes operators, but this will also work, or the majority of this will work without those operators. So if you're not using Kubernetes, you'll still get 80% of the functionality. So warm standby replication configures WAN replication between these two data centers. So this involves an active site where all the publishers and consumers are connected. And it also involves a passive site. And this is what will take over after the DR event and after the failover event. So you can use the Kubernetes operators to create and configure those, but you can also deploy manually using the container image and connect those. So the first element we have at the top here is the schema sync plugin. And this is a commercial plugin which replicates the RabbitMQ topology from the active site to the passive site. While the standby, and as I said here, it then synchronizes the schema and creates this queue on the passive site. The standby replication plugin ensures that the messages and the message state is consistent on the passive site. So during normal operations, applications are publishing to the primary site into this queue. Messages and events remain there until they're processed, and this is being confirmed. And the state of all of this is pulled from the active site to the passive by the active-passive replication plugin. Publish messages and an async write to that replication log. So that's replicated over the passive site. In case of a disaster which causes an outage of the primary data site, the standby cluster can be promoted, at which point all the messages which were not processed on the active site will be repopulated into the appropriate queues. So essentially, we're replicating all of the messages and the message state to the passive site. But when you promote the passive site, you're only enqueuing the non-processed, non-consumed messages. So what that means is the applications, when you do the failover, you point your applications from the active site to the passive site. That means that those applications will be starting with the non-consumed messages first. So application traffic can then be just redirected to this promoted passive site and continue working without worrying about message loss or duplication. The next feature we have in Tanzu RabbitMQ is compression. So this is enabled by default, and it has RabbitMQ has a plugin architecture which has enabled this. And the compression between nodes provides a 93.75% reduction in traffic when you're using quorum queues or any other kind of replicated queue. So you want this when you're essentially having each broker node deployed to a different AZ, and especially when you're having that on the public cloud, because replicating the messages between each of these broker nodes requires you to move across availability zones, and then you'll be being charged for ingress and possibly egress costs, depending on your public cloud provider. So what the compression does is it reduces network utilization by compressing the traffic between those nodes, as I mentioned, by 93.75%. Because it's reducing the network utilization, that means that it's reducing the costs by the same amount. So this uses Z standard library by default, which we found has the best CPU to latency and compression ratio balance. And so essentially every packet that's not transferred across these zones is money back in your pocket. There's a calculator on our website that allows you to see what your savings could be with using this compression plugin, and the savings rather, can add up. The next integration, the plugin that we have, is a HashiCorp Vault integration. This is only available in the Kubernetes offering, so I won't spend lots of time on this, but this has been developed in conjunction with one of our customers, and essentially allows you to integrate your HashiCorp Vault secret management into RabbitMQ. And so it allows for easy rotation of those credentials when you're using HashiCorp Vault. And then the new element to this is the audit log. So we found that customers were needing a way to ensure that they met compliance and monitoring requirements and answer audit queries from regulators in regulated environments. So this audit logger essentially provides a few benefits. It helps you meet those regulatory and compliance requirements by providing a detailed record of events within RabbitMQ and which user initiated them. It also enables real-time monitoring of RabbitMQ events, which is crucial for maintaining system health and performance. It provides a way to troubleshoot, so it's good for diagnosing issues, providing a historical record of the events leading up to any particular incident. And it enhances security by keeping a log of all the actions. The audit log can help detect unauthorized access or other security breaches. So it's got a few smart features to it. There's event filtering. So if you're only interested in some events, you can filter those out. There's also the ability to consume audit logs when declaring a queue. In terms of the configuration options that we have, you can determine how and where they're written, such as either to standard out or to a file on the disk. And it's also resilient because it will handle any connection failures. If you're running this on Kubernetes, this is available across both offerings, but if you're running this on Kubernetes, it will actually automatically discover and collect logs from RabbitMQ clusters within the Kubernetes environment. So you can ensure that any newly created clusters are also monitored and audited as well. let's cover off enterprise support now. So this is available for the open source offering, for any of the Tanzu RabbitMQ offerings, and it's something that you might find is important if you need to have any kind of auditing done, or if you're in a regulated environment, especially as well. And there's a couple of different ways we can approach this, but what we're going to talk about is the section at the top is our enterprise grade support. The section at the bottom is open source support and open source communities. So what you'll find when you're using an open source community, there's lots of very helpful people about, but there are limits essentially on how you communicate with them. There are no confidentiality agreements in place. You can't discuss, commercially sensitive things. Some people are more helpful, some people are less helpful. You have no way of knowing exactly who is the most helpful person within that. And they're only available, obviously, when they're available. When you move on to testing, it's difficult to test the patches that are created based on the community release cycle, or it can be. You're kind of tied to some of those testings. So you need to either then wait for the community release cycle to test and then deploy, or you then need to build from the source and self-package or deploy binaries outside of the packaging. If we switch up to the top track, then there's a number of advantages you get when using open grade, enterprise grade support. So we have a follow the sun support team, which I'll go through in a moment. There's established escalation processes, which again, I'll go through. So you're able to identify issues and validate those issues and the fixes within a certain time frame, and you can provide guarantees around that. There's also curated and tested knowledge base articles that are available. So you know the authorship of those knowledge base articles, they've been validated and tested. You also have software engineers on hand, so the customer support engineers can easily escalate up to the people developing the software, the RabbitMQ team. There's also a full regression test suite, which is utilized, which also does things like integration tests. So with Tanzu RabbitMQ container image and OVA, we're actually packaging and regression testing all of the dependencies together. There's no requirement on you to do that. There's a repeatable packaging process, as I've just mentioned, and the release timing is based on criticalities. You can also discuss things with support that you wouldn't be able to mention and provide data with in the open source community. So there's secure file transfer mechanisms and secure chat that you can use. Let's cover where we are in the globe. So there's support offices in China, in Ireland, and a couple in the USA, North Carolina, and California. And there's also people working from home, logged into our secure VPN. So we essentially do have follow the sun global coverage. Let's cover some of the severities there. So as I mentioned, you don't get this within open source support, but when you're using an enterprise grade support, depending on how critical the impact is to your business, depends on those issues will be resolved first and will be prioritized first. And indeed, if they can't be resolved by the support organization, there's escalation paths up to the people that have actually written the lines of code that may or may not be related to the issue that you're facing. So as you can see, there's various guarantees that we can give around response times in that regard, which gives you some confidence. At this point, we've reached the section where we could talk about the roadmap. So I'm going to hand over to Howard.
Thank you very much, Ed. Yes, so without much ado, we'll dive into the roadmap for RabbitMQ and also Tanzu RabbitMQ. It's important, obviously, because Tanzu RabbitMQ is built on the open source releases. It's good just to take a look at some of the rich features that get released and developed by the open source community. Of course, we reap the benefits of those commercially as well, and add our own specific commercial features to that as well. And before I get on to what's coming up in the future, it's always handy to know where you've come from. And just taking a look at the last sort of 3 releases, in fact, going a little bit before September 2022, we released probably one of our most significant features, which was streams. And streams is a highly performant and persistent form of data. The unique thing about Rabbit is that it can you can have streams and conventional messaging topologies all within the same broker. And there isn't really a messaging system that will do that today. And this is something we've continued to develop over the years. And in September 22, we released Super Streams, which is a collection of streams. So you have partitions essentially within a super stream of individual streams. So that is an immensely powerful tool, and one that is often compared to Apache Kafka. And certainly from a sales point of view, if anybody's looking at Kafka, they should also be looking at RabbitMQ. Although I should really actually say they shouldn't be looking at Kafka, they should only be looking at Rabbit. We've continued to develop OAuth 2 support for Rabbit from a security point of view. And that's a common trend that we see across multiple releases over the years. And back in 2022, with Rabbit 3.11, we also released a single active consumer for streams, which again is another powerful feature that people can utilize and leverage that persistent data model. With 3.12, which was our most recent sort of common release that we built on, we rolled out support for MQTT3. It's although it's a plugin to Rabbit, as Ed has mentioned, Rabbit itself is built on the Advanced Message Queue Protocol (AMQP), and historically we would parse messages into the AMQP format, and that had processing overheads associated with it that kind of slowed things down. So we now have support for what we refer to as native MQTT, and this particular release saw memory usage with MQTT reduced by 95%, and it means that Rabbit can now sustain and support millions of connections, millions of MQTT connections, which of course MQTT is used extensively in the IoT space, where you might exactly have large fan outs to lots and lots of devices. We've also continued to develop our quorum queues, which are a highly durable queue format, and our classic queues, the version 2 of classic queues, where we've increased the performance. Classic queues, I think we increased the performance of those by between 20 and 40%, depending on application. And we've done that by combined use of memory and disk for the way that messages are persisted for these types of queues. And I think it was released today. And we definitely had a release candidate this week for RabbitMQ 3.13. And with that, we see the release of another IoT friendly protocol, MQTT5. And MQTT5 being the latest iteration of that, that offers greater security capabilities and also more flexibility in terms of message routing. And we've also released message containers for Rabbit, and that is actually the technology that we rolled out to give us the native MQTT support that we had in 3.12. This means that we can bring new protocols to market if necessary, and bring them to market relatively quickly as well. And we've also taken our first steps into stream processing with filtering for streams. This is a sort of a proof of concept prototype that we've launched for 3.13 in order to get some user feedback from the community. So when we overlay Tanzu RabbitMQ on top of this, you can see that we've got all of these very rich features enabled from Tanzu Rabbit 1.4 right the way through to what will be version 1.6 next month. The key to a lot of this is the additional features that we add to that, and that's probably more obvious with 1.6 because we've got more features in that commercial version than we've had in others for a while. 1.6 will have FIPS compliance, which is an important compliance checkbox, certainly for some of our financial sector customers. We also have a new package, a tarball package for Rabbit, which is actually something that we've used to build things like the OVA and the OCI packages. But we've discovered that some customers are actually sort of building their own VMs, and it's much easier for them to take the raw tarball of CVE checked, validated components that exist within Rabbit and put that into their own sort of sausage factory, as it were, for building those VMs. We've also got multi-audience for OAuth 2, which kind of breaks the OAuth 2 specification. But for those people that are building and managing fleets of RabbitMQ deployments, the ability to be able to stand up a deployment, an instance of Rabbit for an internal application development team within an organization, hand that over, but still retain a spare set of keys to be able to manage that deployment is quite powerful, as opposed to building that deployment, handing it over to that team internally, and then if they want to make any changes or want you to make any changes to that, you've then got to sort of sheepishly ask them for the keys back so that you can lift the hood and make changes and then hand it back. So that does away with that kind of process. So moving on from the latest release, which, as I say, I think is out this week, we've got version 4 just around the corner. Now, this is a big release of Rabbit coming in Q3 of this year. The key to version 4.0 is Capri. RabbitMQ has its own metadata store. The traditional metadata store is Amnesia, and Capri is replacing that entirely. So this is, like I say, a significant step forward for Rabbit. It's built on the same raft algorithm that we use for quorum queues. So this is something that the engineering team are familiar with, have gained a lot of knowledge and experience with. And as a result, Capri is going to offer much greater consistency and stability going forward, especially in certain sort of network, partition network environments as well. We have done a bulk of our work on testing. There's a zero downtime automatic migration in place for Capri, so there's no need for blue-green migration with this. And it's a phased rollout in the respect that Capri is managed via feature flags as well. In fact, there is a prototype of Capri that's available in 3.13 behind feature flags, but for those people that have existing deployments, Amnesia will still be used. I mentioned MQTT5. We continue to iterate on our IoT offering for Rabbit. And the good news there, as far as we're concerned, is that there are more and more people that are actually mixing conventional AMQP, sort of client application or web-based application tools using AMQP as a protocol, as well as device monitoring and device management using MQTT. And that means that you just use the same message broker for that, whereas historically you might have to use 2 different brokers, which of course can be a challenge for some people. I mentioned filtering for streams. This is our first sort of step into stream filtering. It's based on a Bloom filter. It reduces client load and saves network bandwidth. It's applied at chunk level or message sort of batch level as well. And each message that's published has an associated filter value with it. And you can define one or several different sort of filter values. And there is going to be the need, obviously, for some definition of client-side filtering as well. This isn't a silver bullet in that respect, but nonetheless, it will dramatically reduce the client load if filtering is required. 4.0 will also see support of the latest AMQP protocol, AMQP 1.0. That's quite a departure from 091. It's got some quite powerful routing features available to it, and that's something that we're going to continue to iterate on. And again, we're kind of leveraging this message container concept that I mentioned previously. And finally, quorum queues sees the addition of priorities. Priority queues was something that people leverage quite a lot, certainly with classic mirrored queues. So we've added that feature into quorum queues, and the team are in the process of gauging some feedback from prototype concepts on that, and we will be rolling that out into 4.0 going forward. Tanzu Application Service sees a bit of a refresh as well, a bit of an update. As Ed mentioned in his section, TAS is very important to us strategically. We've got lots of customers on there, and we are rolling out warm standby replication on the tile, as we refer to it. And one of the key aspects of doing this is to improve the user experience, and we're doing that by leveraging an API that will enable downstream promotion on the Tanzu application service, and that's going to significantly improve, as I say, the user experience. And this API also will enable developers to create their own scripts, their own applications that can actually control and manage and monitor the status of warm standby replication as well. So in some respects, you've actually got control of that failover situation. You've almost got an active type environment with your own application development within that. So that update is coming in April. So yeah, watch this space for an update on that. Now we've got multiple formats available in Tanzu RabbitMQ. Previously, I mentioned 4.0 of the open source. We are aligning the version numbers of Tanzu RabbitMQ and the open source. So where previously we've had version 3.13 and version 1.6 of Tanzu RabbitMQ, which is built on open source 3.13, it gets a little bit confusing. Now, from 4.0 onwards, in Q3, there will be a commercial Tanzu RabbitMQ version 4 that is in line with the open source version 4. So as well as the open source features that I mentioned just a moment ago, we've got the audit logger that Ed mentioned, and we've got the various packages, but we're also rolling out warm standby replication for streams in 4.0 as well. So again, we continue to evolve and develop our stream capability. And just to sort of wrap up some of these feature sets and the capabilities, we've got this is quite a handy sort of look up in terms of the business benefits of some of these capabilities. And just, as I say, to recap, from a business continuity point of view, we've got the warm standby replication features. We've got the new metadata store with Capri, which again is an enterprise data safety concept. From a data governance point of view, the audit logger, performance, native AMQP 1.0, and also filtering for streams. I should also point out that in certain scenarios, we believe, and we've had anecdotal evidence that the performance of streams will actually outreach some of our competitors, and in particular, the most obvious being Apache Kafka. But of course, there is a GitHub project that I've encouraged people to have a look at using Spring and streams. So yeah, have a look at that. Interoperability, another protocol added to the list with MQTT5. And of course, from a deployment point of view, we continue to offer as many different options as we possibly can, and many different packages as we can with RabbitMQ. So that wraps up our presentation and my bit on the roadmap. And I suspect we might have, I hope, we've got a couple of questions.
We do have a few questions here, Howard. Well, first, I just want to say thanks to Ed and Howard for being here today. They are, like I mentioned, in the UK, so it is in their evening, so we do appreciate you guys spending the time with us today. So we do have a few questions here. This first one I'll start with is, how do I know how to scale a RabbitMQ deployment?
Yep, that's an excellent question. So essentially, the easiest way to get started is to vertically scale your RabbitMQ deployment. So any of the VMs that are running RabbitMQ, you can vertically scale those, giving more RAM, giving more CPU. In terms of scaling it additionally to that, you can also add additional VMs to that. So there's a number of different distributed configurations. You've got replicated configurations that involve quorum queues. You can add more broker nodes to that configuration, and there's documentation on the website about how to do that and some of the handy guardrails and recommended configurations for doing it.
There's also quite a handy tool, PerfTest, which you can download, a little Java application that you can run, and you can tweak PerfTest to produce messages at a certain rate and at a certain size as well. So users can appreciate the relationship between message frequency and message size as well, and get some idea with their topology in terms of throughput that they're likely to get.
Thanks, guys. Another question here is, our organization is standardized on OpenShift. Can we still get support for RabbitMQ deployed on OpenShift?
Yes, you can. We will support RabbitMQ on OpenShift. We support all of the major Kubernetes distributions. So if you're running RabbitMQ that we've produced, or you're running the open source Docker image, then we'll be able to support that.
I think this is similar as well. We can ask this. Can I get RabbitMQ support without buying any other VMware by Broadcom products or subscriptions?
Yep, you can. So there's a specific SKU. You just need to contact us via the form on the website. That's tanzu.vmware.com/RabbitMQ. And a salesperson will be in touch with you. You don't need to buy any other VMware by Broadcom products. We are a standalone product. There are better together kind of stories, which we've mentioned earlier on the presentation about additional capabilities, but you can just buy RabbitMQ. That's totally fine.
Great. Thanks. It looks like those are all the questions that we have here today. I do want to just note that we did include the overview page. I think that the link that Ed had just mentioned in the attachment section, as well as a link test drive and documentation on Tanzu RabbitMQ. So feel free to download or click on those links that we've provided. In addition, this has been recorded and will be available on demand. So if there's something that you missed or you wanted to share with your team, you will receive the MP4 recording shortly after the end of this presentation, along with those links. So don't feel like you have to copy and paste those links to your browser right now. They'll be sent over to you via email shortly. I do want to just say a special thank you to Ed and Howard. Thank you guys again for joining us today. I know it is dinner time for you guys shortly, so it's nice that we ended the day with you guys, for you guys. So if you have any other comments or anything you guys like to leave off with before we close today's presentation, I'll give you guys the floor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks AJ for helping organize, and thanks everyone for attending and for feeding us your questions.
And, you know, as I say this, there's one other question, if you guys are okay. How is RabbitMQ better or different than Kafka?
Well, there's a number of ways RabbitMQ is different or better than Kafka. So Kafka will only support streaming semantics. RabbitMQ can support both messaging and streaming semantics in the same broker. We also hear from customers and users that running open source Kafka and administering Kafka can get quite difficult at larger scales. So there are, there's no good open source technology to help with that. So we hear that from external customers, that RabbitMQ is easier to manage in that regard. And if you're using RabbitMQ for both messaging and streaming use cases, then of course you can use all the same RabbitMQ expertise. You can use all the same monitoring and operational tooling you're already using for your messaging technologies. And so you're essentially getting a bit of cost savings there in terms of logistics.
Excellent. All right. It looks like we got another question. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I was going to ask that right at the end.
Oh.
Is it Ed's birthday today?
It is my birthday, yes. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Ed. Thank you for joining us today. I can't imagine a better gift for us than to have you on your birthday.
Yeah, because you wouldn't rather be in the pub, obviously.
No, absolutely not.
Very kind of you. Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Marilyn.
Excellent. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Howard. Thanks to everyone for all of the questions. Again, special birthday shout out to our friend Ed. Happy birthday, Ed. I'm sure everyone in the back here is wishing you happy birthday as well. So again, this has been recorded. Will be available after the end of this presentation along with the attachments. And we hope to see you guys at our next event. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Howard. See you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.